So I've got a huge update regarding net neutrality, and really we've got fantastic news. So as you've seen over the course of the last couple of months, little by little, we have some states, some governors, some attorneys general taking action to protect net neutrality. And now when we step back and look at all of the progress that states have made, it's now the case that more states have taken action to protect net neutrality than states that haven't. And now dozens of states and a total of nearly 70% of the country's overall population lives in states that are fighting to protect net neutrality. So as you can see from this map here, there are just 13 states that haven't taken any action whatsoever to protect net neutrality, but overall, you can see the various ways that other states are fighting to protect net neutrality. So let me give you a little bit of details about this map's key. So black means that state passed a law protecting net neutrality fully. And at this point, only one state has done that thus far, and that is Washington. However, Oregon is currently dark gray, meaning that both legislative chambers has in fact passed legislation, and the governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, is expected to sign that into law. So Oregon is expected to become the second state to switch to black, and California may soon be switching to dark gray because they are currently weighing a bill to protect net neutrality as well. Now, additionally, orange means that a governor has stepped up to protect net neutrality via executive order in that state. Brown means that a state's attorney general has joined Eric Schneiderman's lawsuit to sue the FCC. And green, this is another rare thing, means that various municipalities in that state has moved towards public broadband. And currently, Colorado is the only state with more than 100 municipalities that has decided to sign up for public broadband, although Hawaii may become the next state because they are considering statewide public broadband. And blue means that a net neutrality bill was introduced by a lawmaker from that state. Now, by looking at this map, as you can see, there are quite a bit of states that are blue. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that law will be passed, but it means that at least one lawmaker in that state sees the importance of protecting net neutrality. Now, again, I want to reiterate the importance of the domino effect, because when Washington State that is, passed net neutrality legislation, more states began to immediately follow suit. We have Oregon now on the cusp of passing net neutrality. We have California considering even tougher legislation than the state of Washington, which then had the toughest net neutrality law proposed in the entire country when it passed. But now we see 28 states in total moving in Washington's direction, and that includes the state of Alaska, California, as I mentioned, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Kansas, Kentucky, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. And of course, there's some overlap because in those states where a lawmaker has proposed a bill to protect net neutrality, well, in some cases, that state's governor has already signed an executive order guaranteeing that net neutrality will be preserved, and that now is at 5 states in total, including Hawaii, Montana, New Jersey, New York, and Vermont. Now, if your state's lawmaker, if your governor hasn't taken action to preserve net neutrality, then it may be the case that your attorney general has, because in 23 states, attorneys general have signed on to sue the FCC and join New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman's lawsuit, and this includes California, Connecticut, Delaware, D.C., Hawaii, Illinois, Iowa, Kentucky, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Minnesota, Montana, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, and Washington State. And if you live in a state that hasn't done much to protect net neutrality, maybe it's the case that you live in a city where your mayor has decided to protect net neutrality, because there is a Mayors for Net Neutrality coalition featuring 11 mayors. This includes Bill de Blasio from New York City, Steve Adler from Austin, Texas, Ted Wheeler from Portland, Oregon, Ron Nierenberg from San Antonio, Texas, Sly James from Kansas City, Missouri, Mark Farrell from San Francisco, California, Catherine Pugh from Baltimore, Maryland, Barney Saney from Putnam, Connecticut, Paul Soglin from Madison, Wisconsin, Sam Liccardo from San Jose, California, and Jacob Frey from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And again, I want to emphasize that some states are not only protecting net neutrality in one way, they're doing it in a multitude of ways. So some states have their governor, their attorney general, and lawmakers teaming up to protect net neutrality in different ways. So this is huge. So at this point, if you live in a state that hasn't done at least one thing to protect net neutrality, or if you don't even have one lawmaker that decided to introduce legislation to protect net neutrality, then you really have to take action, because if you don't have a state that's going to act soon, well, Ajit Pai's anti-net neutrality order will go into effect, I believe, at the end of April. So things are getting serious, and this is why a lot of states are acting. Now, there's currently only 11 states that haven't done anything to preserve net neutrality. This includes Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Indiana, Louisiana, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. So in all 13 of those states, not even one lawmaker decided to introduce a bill to protect net neutrality. That, to me, is completely unacceptable. How can you not have a single lawmaker from either party stand up for a bipartisan issue that's incredibly popular, where the overwhelming majority of the American people will be on your side? Makes no sense, but those 13 states haven't done anything. So if you live in one of those states, call your state senator, call your state representative, and make sure that he or she knows that you're paying attention. And when it comes time for their re-election, you're not going to have their back if they're not going to have your back. And furthermore, if you don't have a lawmaker who's representing you nationally in the Senate or in the House of Representatives that is refusing to sign on to the Congressional Review Act to nullify the FCC's repeal of net neutrality, which would be the easiest way to preserve net neutrality, then you also need to call him or her and let them know that they need to take a stand. But I want to make this video about states because I am so proud of the progress all of these states have made to protect net neutrality. Now, I want to focus on 3 states in particular because there's a lot going on, and I think it's important that we kind of dive into the details and explore what's happening. So, when it comes to the state of California, they're considering a bill so strong, if it passes, it would actually go beyond the original Title II protections that the FCC passed in 2015. So as Clint Finley of Wired reports, California State Senator Scott Wiener on Wednesday introduced a bill that would create a regime in some ways more strict than the Obama-era rules against blocking, throttling, or otherwise discriminating against content. Most important, Wiener's bill, if passed, would in many cases ban broadband providers from exempting certain content from data limits, a concept known as zero rating. For example, AT&T would no longer be allowed to exempt its DirecTV Now video streaming service from its customers' data caps while counting data consumed by competing services like Sling TV. The FCC claimed authority to regulate the practice on a case-by-case basis, but never took formal action against it. This would be a monumental victory for net neutrality, because even when we had Title II net neutrality on the books, well, these companies who are so greedy were finding a roundabout way to violate net neutrality, and the way that they were doing this is they weren't treating all web traffic equally, not by blocking or throttling, but by simply allowing their own content to not go towards their customers' data caps. So if you're not treating all content equally, if you're trying to discourage people from using certain types of web apps or services, you're violating net neutrality. And the FCC, even under Obama's administration, well, they didn't really go after this in the way that they should, but California here is making sure that they have the power to do away with this sort of zero rating scheme, which honestly, it's a violation of net neutrality. Now, when it comes to the state of Alaska, they have 2 bills that's being considered, one in the House and one in the Senate, and as Annie Zach of Anchorage Daily News reports, 2 bills working their way through the legislature would prevent internet service providers in Alaska from slowing down or blocking access to whichever lawful websites they choose and prohibit paid prioritization of certain sites. Now, the House version of this bill, which is Bill 227, has co-sponsors from the Democratic Party, and the Senate version, which is Bill 160, has bipartisan support reportedly. So it's looking pretty good in Alaska. So certainly there's some momentum there. You just need to push them in the right direction. So you live in that state, please make the calls needed to get this codified into law. Now, when it comes to the state of Oregon, which is my state, Michael Gillette of Oregon Live explains that the Oregon House and Senate both passed a bill protecting net neutrality, and the governor is expected to now sign it into law. However, this will obviously open the door to a lawsuit against the state for violating the FCC's preemption rule. And yes, that is technically true. By passing laws protecting net neutrality, these states are opening the door to them being sued by the FCC or the federal government. But the alternative is to do nothing. So should they just do nothing and worry about getting sued, or should they take action, protect net neutrality, and then bolster our own argument and even our own legal argument, arguably, because more states are signing up to protect net neutrality? I mean, that's obviously the right course of action. If the FCC wants to fight each of these states, then so be it. But if you're a lawmaker, you have a responsibility to take action for your constituents, and that's exactly what Oregon lawmakers are doing, and I applaud them for it. So here's what we have to do now. We can't just sit back and be excited about the fact that dozens of states are fighting to protect net neutrality, because the only reason why they're doing this is because we've continued to keep pressure on them ever since the FCC did vote to repeal net neutrality on December 14th of last year. But we have to keep the momentum going. So not only do you need to call your state lawmaker, but you also need to call who represents you in the United States Senate and House of Representatives to make sure that that individual signs on to the Congressional Review Act's joint resolution to nullify the FCC's repeal of net neutrality. If we could do that, all this action at the state level, it won't even really be necessary, because that would just undo the FCC's December vote. But still, we can't bank on Congress doing the right thing, because obviously, as it stands now, there's only 50 co-sponsors of the CRA in the Senate, which means that it'd be a tie. Mike Pence would come in, probably break that tie, and there'd be no chance that it gets to Donald Trump's desk. Now, in the event it does get to Donald Trump's desk, is he going to sign that into law? Absolutely not. But it still will elevate this issue to a national level, hopefully garner maybe a little bit of mainstream media coverage, give us a break from hearing about Russia and Stormy Daniels and Don Jr. and his wife. I mean, this is a really important issue. The mainstream media has completely failed us here. They have not talking about this issue. They casually mentioned it a couple of times once it was repealed, but most of the segments, you guys all saw the videos I did, were negative. They were against net neutrality or presented the issue in a skewed manner to suggest that this was a battle between giant tech companies like Comcast and Verizon versus Google and Facebook. That's not the case. This is the people versus these gigantic corporations and a rogue FCC chairman named Ajit Pai, who's only doing the bidding of his former and future employer. So if we want to fight to protect net neutrality, then we have to take action, and it's easy. You just got to make some calls, and if you really can, make a huge difference and show up to your representative or senator's office, because nothing tells them that you're serious about an issue like going there face to face. But a lot of us, to be realistic, we have jobs, we have responsibility, we don't have time for that. So certainly if you can call, that's substantial. If they receive enough calls, they will take action, and there's evidence that that works. All you have to do is look at that map and see what activism for net neutrality does. So let's get them.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.